Welcome to a place where mirrors don't just reflect, they watch. Where footsteps in empty halls don't echo from the past. They warn of what's still there. These are not just ghost stories. These are warnings. 5 real horror stories. Inspired by whispers. Based on urban legends, eyewitness accounts, and maybe, just maybe, something real. Are you watching alone? You shouldn't be. Let's begin. I didn't believe in evil, at least, not until I moved into that house. It was small, 2 stories, just outside Union, Missouri. From the outside, it looked harmless. A bit old, sure. The shutters creaked, the paint was peeling, but nothing unusual. I moved in on a Sunday, but by Tuesday night, I stopped sleeping. The first thing I noticed was the sound, a low hum, like someone breathing behind the walls. At 2 a.m., it changed. The hum became a growl, and the growl turned into a scream. It didn't just come from any room I could find. It came from under the floorboards, and somehow I was trembling. Literally, from the walls, from the air itself. The first time I heard it, I froze. I remember gripping the doorknob so tight my knuckles turned white. It sounded like a woman, but not quite. Probably mid-30s, couldn't quite catch. Her voice was too low, too guttural, and she wasn't screaming in fear. She was screaming in rage. The next morning, I found muddy footprints in the hallway. I live alone, by the way, and there were no signs of broken windows or open doors. Just tracks. That stopped halfway down the hallway. These tracks didn't start or end anywhere. I told myself it was a prank, or maybe I was sleepwalking. But then the mirrors started changing. Every time I passed the hallway mirror, my reflection felt off. My eyes looked wrong. They were still brown, still shaped like mine, but they held this void, like something was staring back through me. One night, I was walking past the hallway mirror, the same one I've passed 100 times, when something made me stop. No, not stop, freeze. Because in the glass, I was still there, but I had already walked past. I turned my head slowly, heart pounding, and the reflection, my reflection, didn't follow. It just stood there, staring at me, and then it smiled. But it wasn't my smile. It was too wide, too knowing, like it had been waiting. I stood rooted to the spot, my mouth dry, my stomach twisting. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a glitch, a dream. But deep down, I knew something had changed. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called a priest because I didn't know what else to do. He stepped inside the front door, looked around, and whispered, "There's something old here." He lit incense, said a few prayers, but halfway through, he choked. His eyes rolled back and his arms stiffened, and he dropped the incense right onto the floor. Smoke filled the living room, and the air felt thick like it didn't want us there. He looked at me, terrified, and said, "Whatever is here, it knows you now." That sentence stuck with me. Knows me? Like it had seen me before? Or like it was watching, waiting? The house felt different after that. He didn't stay long, just sprinkled some holy water, whispered something in Latin, and left. I didn't blame him. The air felt heavy, like the walls were pressing in. And that night, I saw her. I woke up at 3:30 a.m., cold, sweating, paralyzed, and unable to breathe. She stood at the foot of my bed, tall, pale, her mouth stretched too wide, like it had been torn open. She wasn't blinking. She didn't move. She just screamed, but no sound came out. Not from her mouth. The scream was inside my head, like someone had turned my brain into an echo chamber. It was piercing, endless, and it made my vision blur. My ears rang, my nose started to bleed, and still, she didn't move. She just kept screaming into my skull. I tried to get up. I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. Not even a finger. It felt like she was holding me down without ever touching me. Then, just as suddenly, she was gone. No footsteps, no flicker, just gone. I packed my bags the next morning. I left everything that wasn't truly important and didn't even grab my photos. But the worst part, the screams didn't stay behind. Sometimes, at 2 a.m. I still hear her in my hallway, even though I don't live there anymore. And now, my mirrors smile too. I never used to believe in ghosts. Demons? Maybe. But ghosts? Nah. That was something people made up to explain the creaks in old houses or the cold spots in empty rooms. That changed the summer I stayed in Kentucky. It was 2011. My mom had just had surgery, so my aunt invited me to stay at her place in a small town about 2 hours out from Louisville. I'd never been to the South before. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone and where time moved slower. But something about it felt wrong. Like the quiet wasn't peace. It was hiding something. She lived above her antique shop in this creaky 2-story building across the street from an old, abandoned funeral home. The building looked frozen in time. The grass was never cut. The windows were always dark. But it was the chimney that got me. It looked scorched, like fire had clawed its way out from inside. I remember asking her about it one afternoon. She stopped, went pale, and then muttered, "Don't look at it too long. That's how she finds you." She? I laughed nervously. Who's she? She didn't answer. The first 2 nights were quiet, a little too quiet. No dogs barking, no cars passing, just this constant feeling like something was watching from just out of sight. Like, if you turned too fast, you'd catch something ducking behind a corner. Then came the 3rd night. I remember because the clock read 2:14 a.m. I had woken up with this tight feeling in my chest, like I couldn't move or breathe. The air in the room was stale, almost damp. I got up to open the window, and that's when I heard it, humming, soft, childlike, broken, like a music box playing with rusted gears. At first I thought it was a neighbor, or maybe a music toy left on. But when I leaned in closer, I recognized the song. Ring Around the Rosie. Pocket full of posies. My throat tightened. There were no kids in this neighborhood. None. I inched toward the window and peeled the curtain just enough to peek outside. And then I saw her. She was standing directly in front of the funeral home, Small, pale, barefoot, wearing a white dress stained with something dark, black patches that looked like soot, or blood, or both. She didn't move, she didn't blink, she just stood there, humming, and then, I swear to you, she turned her head completely backwards, not like a turn and look. Her whole neck rotated slowly, bone by bone, until her empty eyes were facing me. But her body was still pointing forward. That was when I saw her face properly. Her mouth was too wide, not in a smile, in something worse. A stretch, like it had been cut that way. And her eyes, oh God, her eyes, they were hollow, but still moving, like two black holes swirling in opposite directions. I jumped back, heart in my throat, and that's when I heard it. The humming wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the room, directly behind me. I turned slowly. There was nothing. But the mirror was fogged up, even though the room was cold. And there, written in the fog, in tiny childlike letters, were the words, "She sees you." I didn't sleep. I just sat on the floor with the lights on, trying to pray, trying to stay awake. By morning, I felt sick, like something had drained every ounce of energy from me. That's when my aunt finally sat me down and told me the truth. There was a fire in the funeral home, she said. Back in 1987, a little girl had died in a house fire. Her family brought her body here for embalming. But that night, the funeral home caught fire too. Some say it was arson. Some say it was something else. Her voice lowered. The body was never found. They say she never left. She went on to say that every year in July, the anniversary week, locals report the same thing. A child humming "Ring Around the Rosie," a girl in white, barefoot, foggy mirrors, cold spots, and worst of all, people are reporting waking up at exactly 2:14 a.m. with bruises on their necks, bruises in the shape of tiny fingers. I packed my bags that afternoon, told my aunt I'd stay in a hotel for the rest of the trip. But the horror didn't end when I left. Weeks later, I was back home. One night, I went to the bathroom and flipped on the light, and there it was, a handprint on my mirror. Small, wet, red. I wiped it, looked away, and behind me, just for a second, I saw her standing by the door, head tilted. That smile that's not a smile. I shut my eyes and screamed. When I opened them again, she was gone. But the smell of smoke, it lingered in my house for 3 whole days. It was around 1 or 2 a.m. I was walking home from a late-night movie. I was living alone at the time. A small apartment, but nothing fancy, just a few blocks from downtown. Downtown was quiet, empty. Streetlights flickered every few blocks, and the only sound was my own footsteps hitting the sidewalk. I wasn't scared, I was just tired and couldn't wait to get home and jump into bed. I had my phone in my pocket and my earphones out. I wanted to be alert just in case. But that's when I noticed something. A man standing under one of the streetlights, about 2 blocks ahead. He was tall, too tall for a man. wearing a suit like an old-fashioned one with shiny shoes. He wasn't moving. I felt he was one of the locals, but somehow he was just standing there with his head tilted slightly back like he was looking at the sky. And he was smiling, not just a regular smile. This was off, his mouth stretched far wider than it should be, like someone had taken a knife and pulled the corners of his lips up. It looked like a mask, like the Joker, and I was contemplating if this was one of those Halloween pranks. But that smile never moved, and that's when I knew this was real. He didn't blink, didn't twitch. He just stood there, under the light, smiling up at the sky. I slowed down, crossed to the other side of the street because I figured maybe he was drunk or mentally unwell. I just didn't want to assume anything, but I wasn't going to walk past him either. But just as I stepped off the curb to cross, he moved, but not like a normal person. No, this was sudden and strange, like a puppet yanked by a string. He turned his head sharply to look at me, still smiling, still not blinking. My feet froze. He didn't say a word. Then he started walking toward me. Not fast, but not slow either, like a predator, like he was enjoying the walk. Each step echoing, click, 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 against the pavement. Still, smiling, still, not blinking. I crossed the street again, trying not to look scared. He crossed too, matched my pace. One step for every one of mine. He was getting closer. Too close. My heart was slamming in my chest. I didn't want to run, didn't want to provoke him, so I sped up, walking faster, and so did he, still smiling. And then he started dancing, no music, no rhythm, just arms flailing in weird, jerky motions. His legs were twirling like he was spinning in slow motion, like some deranged ballet. But his face, it never changed, still that wide, hideous smile looking straight at me. Now I was scared, properly scared. I crossed again this time, faster. He skipped across the street after me, still dancing. I broke into a jog, and he jogged too. No more dancing, no more skipping, just following me now, full speed. No words, no sound, just that strange smile. I turned a corner and sprinted the last few blocks to my apartment. I slammed the building door shut, ran up 3 flights of stairs, and locked myself in. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window for hours, peeking through the blinds, waiting, but he never came. But here's the part that still haunts me. The next day, I went to work, tired, shaky. I told my coworker what happened, and she just stared at me. Wait, that happened to you too? My blood ran cold. Last year, downtown, he danced, followed me, never said a word, just smiled, same suit, same night. We looked at each other. No one else believed us. But every once in a while, I swear I still see that same smile. In reflections, in crowds, and even in my dreams. Always watching, always smiling. This next story is loosely inspired by the legend of the haunted mirror at the Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana, but no one's ever heard it told quite like this. I should have left the mirror where I found it, at the back of a flea market, covered in dust, leaning against a cracked dresser. The woman who sold it to me, she didn't even want money. She said I could have it for free. She looked relieved to get rid of it, and I should have known. but I brought it home anyway, hung it in my bedroom, right above my dresser. It was beautiful, actually an antique frame, golden trim, a bit scratched, but elegant. At night, it gave the room a certain mood. I liked it. At first. The first time I noticed something weird, it was small. I waved at myself in the mirror, but my reflection didn't wave back. There was a delay of half a second. I remember staring at the glass, blinking, moving slowly left to right, and my reflection? It followed just a beat too late. I laughed it off. I told myself I was tired and maybe the effect of the anesthesia hadn't worn off yet. But then things got worse. A few nights later, I was brushing my hair before bed, my usual night routine, until I saw something in the corner of the mirror. A shadow, tall, thin, standing behind me, not moving. I turned around instantly. Nothing. No one. I turned back to the mirror. The shadow was gone, but now my reflection was smiling. I wasn't. I froze in horror and screamed loudly while staring at the mirror. My own face in the mirror was grinning back at me. I dropped my brush, backed away, and suddenly the smile disappeared, and my reflection turned back to normal again, dead serious like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep that night, and I also left the light on. I stayed up watching the mirror from across the room, but it didn't move. Not once. The next night, I covered the mirror with a bedsheet. I didn't want to see it, but that didn't help, because at exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up sweating, choking, like something was sitting on my chest. I looked up, and the sheet was on the floor. The mirror was uncovered. My reflection? It was standing, but I was still in bed. But the version of me in the mirror was standing by the dresser, staring back, head tilted slightly, hands twitching. Then it stepped closer to the glass. I didn't move. It was as if I was glued to a spot, my hands on my mouth, withholding the scream I could hear. I couldn't move. Then it smiled and whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but I felt them. I screamed louder than ever, and just like that, it was gone, back to normal, almost like I had imagined it. I called a friend who knew so much about mystic arts and the underworld, and the next morning, when he walked in, he paused, didn't say a word for a full minute, then whispered, "This mirror, it's a gate." He wouldn't touch it. He told me to get rid of it, and so I did. I drove to a river 30 miles out, at sunrise, threw the mirror into the water, and watched it sink. But see, that night, as I brushed my teeth, I looked up, and the mirror was back, right above the dresser, perfectly dry, perfectly still. I let out a shrieking scream, and my reflection, it was already waiting. They told me not to open the freezer. Just finish your shoot, don't touch anything, don't wander. I should have listened. It was supposed to be a quick photo job. I was hired to do documentation for a horror film crew that had rented out the abandoned West Hall of the old asylum. The building had been shut down since the 80s. No power, no plumbing, just rot. When I walked in, I noticed something odd. Everything smelled like damp wood and metal, except the freezer room. It was cold, still, too still, like something was preserving the silence. The freezer door was chained shut, thick rusted chain wrapped around 3 times with a padlock the size of my fist. A sign hung over it in red spray paint, "Don't open, even if it knocks." I laughed it off, assuming it was part of the film crew's set design, but the production assistant leaned in and whispered, "That was already there when we arrived." That night, as we set up for a shot, I heard it. 3 knocks. From inside the freezer, everyone else had headphones on. No one heard it but me. I stared at the door. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Then, a voice. Software childlike, right in my ear. "It's cold in here. Let me out." I ran to the director, told him what I heard. He brushed me off and said the asylum used to house over 1,000 patients at a time, some kids too. Probably just the wind or my imagination. But later, during the break, I went back to the freezer room alone. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to prove I wasn't crazy. Maybe I just wanted the knocking to stop. The chain was gone. I swear to you, I never heard it come off. No sounds, no creaking, nothing. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to show the dark, slick interior. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. Inside were scratches on the walls, deep, carved in with fingers or teeth. And then I saw something move, a figure, not fully formed, almost like smoke in the shape of a girl, curled in the corner. She turned her head toward me, but her eyes weren't set right. One faced me, the other face, something behind me. "It's warmer out here," she said. "But we don't belong out here." Then she screamed. I didn't run. I collapsed. Woke up outside with the medic shaking me. Everyone swore they never saw me go in. They'd been looking for me for an hour. The freezer was locked again, chained back in place. But this time, the spray-painted warning had changed. It didn't say "don't open." It said, "Don't come back." You heard the knocks. You saw the mirrors smile. You listened to the girl who turned her head all the way around. The question now is, which story will follow you home? If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment your favorite story, and most importantly, don't look behind you when the screen fades to black, because that's when they like to watch. Good night. And don't forget to check your mirror before you go to sleep.